The meeting ends. The voices fade. Only the low hum of the air conditioner fills the room. Across the table sits someone who's just taken credit for your work. You notice it, feel it, but say nothing. You tell yourself it's not worth the conflict, that silence is maturity. Yet as everyone leaves, the weight in your chest lingers, like a stone you swallowed whole. Most people have lived through a moment like this, small injustices that collect quietly over time. The more we try to be kind, the more invisible we become. The paradox is cruel. The softer you speak, the easier it is for others to talk over you. We grow up believing kindness will protect us, but the world often rewards the opposite. From childhood, we're taught that being nice is a moral shield. Say thank you, don't interrupt, forgive quickly. These lessons shape us, but they also train us to survive by pleasing, and when that training follows us into adulthood, survival turns into exhaustion. We bend, we smile, we comply, and then wonder why our voices no longer carry any weight. Psychologists call it conditional approval, the unspoken rule that love and acceptance depend on how agreeable we are. It starts at home, gets reinforced in school, and perfected at work. We learn to sacrifice authenticity for peace, unaware that every compromise erodes another piece of our dignity. We chase harmony like oxygen, but end up suffocating inside it. A candle can light an entire room, yet melt itself away. Kindness, when left unguarded, works the same way. It warms others while consuming its source. Many mistake that burning for virtue, but it's really depletion disguised as goodness. In that quiet depletion lies the real conflict, the need for harmony colliding with the deeper hunger for self-respect. We crave connection, yet we also crave recognition. When those two forces pull in opposite directions, the kind person fractures inside. One part wants to stay peaceful, the other wants to scream, and this conflict shows up everywhere. The friend who listens endlessly but is never heard. The partner who forgives without being asked. The employee who stays late while everyone else leaves early. These aren't acts of generosity anymore, they're negotiations for value. Beneath each gesture hides a small, desperate hope. Maybe if I keep giving, they'll finally see my worth. But human behavior doesn't work that way. Respect doesn't come from good intentions, it comes from boundaries. People don't honor what's endlessly available. They honor what's scarce, what demands awareness. When someone says no with calm firmness, the room shifts, attention sharpens. Boundaries declare a truth words rarely can. There is a limit, and I respect it enough to defend it. The uncomfortable reality is that the world often confuses gentle souls with weak ones. Yet it's not cruelty that earns respect. It's clarity. Kindness without structure invites exploitation. Kindness with structure commands admiration. Every relationship, personal or professional, operates on this hidden equation. We might think this realization is modern, born in therapy rooms and psychology books. But centuries ago, a Florentine diplomat named Niccolo Machiavelli saw it just as clearly. He lived among rulers and traitors, in courts where a single gesture could mean survival or exile. From that brutal theater of power, he reached a conclusion few dared to admit. People respond more strongly to consequence than to goodwill. That wasn't cynicism, it was observation. And though it may sound cold, it reveals something timeless about human nature. We respect what we fear losing. A leader, a parent, or a friend earns true regard, not through endless giving, but through the strength to define what cannot be taken from them. So if you've ever wondered why your warmth is met with indifference, while others command attention with ease, the answer might not be that the world is cruel, but that it understands a rule you were never taught. That the next step is learning that rule consciously, to see how fear, respect, and authority intertwine, not to become ruthless, but to stop being invisible. And for that we turn to the man who mapped this terrain, long before psychology had a name for it. Florence, 15th century. The air is thick with incense and suspicion. Courtiers whisper in candlelit corridors. Alliances form over wine and shatter before sunrise. Behind every polite bow hides a calculation. And in the middle of this delicate chaos stands a man with ink-stained fingers, Niccolo Machiavelli, quietly watching the theater of power unfold. He sees rulers rise through charm and fall through mercy. He watches men adored by crowds, later dragged through the streets by the same hands that once applauded them, and through this brutal rhythm, he begins to understand a law few dare to admit. Affection is fragile. Respect built on consequence lasts longer. He doesn't write this with bitterness, but with clarity. In a world ruled by betrayal, fear becomes a stabilizer, not because it poisons the heart, but because it reminds the mind of limits. To be feared, he realized, isn't to be cruel, it's to be taken seriously. Centuries later, that same dynamic still governs every room we enter. Not royal courts anymore, but offices, classrooms, and relationships. The setting changed, the psychology didn't. Picture a teacher walking into a noisy classroom. The chatter stops before she says a word. Not because she's loud, but because she's consistent. Students know what happens when they cross a line. They know she means what she says. That predictability, not punishment, builds respect. It's an invisible authority, born from consequence, not aggression. Now imagine another teacher, kind, smiling, endlessly patient, but whose boundaries shift with every mood. One day she tolerates chaos, the next she pleads for silence. Her warmth is real, but her inconsistency tells the room, you can push further. Slowly the class tests her patience, until even her kindness loses meaning. This is the psychology Machiavelli recognized long before modern science gave it a name. Fear, in its balanced form, heightens awareness. It sharpens focus. When the mind senses a boundary, attention locks in. That's why, in human behavior, respect isn't born from affection. It's the byproduct of perceived strength. Neuroscientists later confirmed this. The amygdala, our internal alarm system, activates in the presence of authority. It doesn't just respond to danger, it also responds to order. Healthy fear isn't terror, it's awareness wrapped in caution. It's what keeps systems stable, kingdoms, classrooms, even families. Without it, chaos always finds a way in. But this is where most people misunderstand. They think being respected means being dominant. That's the distortion. Machiavelli never glorified cruelty. He warned against it. He observed that hatred is far more dangerous than fear, because hatred burns even after power is gone. Fear steadies, hatred destroys. One keeps others aware, the other drives them to vengeance. In modern life, that difference still defines real leadership. A manager who rules through insults may get short-term results, but the moment he turns his back, resentment grows like mold. Meanwhile, the leader who speaks few words, rewards loyalty, and never tolerates deceit, builds something deeper, cautious respect. People may not love him, but they rarely cross him. The same law applies to personal life. When others know you'll protect your dignity, they automatically adjust their behavior. Boundaries are a kind of gravity, invisible but undeniable. Remove them, and everything starts to drift. Accepting this truth isn't easy. It collides with everything we were taught about goodness. We grew up hearing that love heals, patience wins, forgiveness redeems, and yes, they do, but only when anchored in strength. Without that foundation, love turns into dependency, patience into avoidance, and forgiveness into permission. That's the emotional clash at the heart of this idea, the tension between morality and survival. We want to believe kindness alone can sustain peace, but history, psychology, and everyday life tell a different story. The world doesn't respect softness alone. It respects balance, empathy with edges, warmth protected by will. Machiavelli didn't invent that truth. He only held up the mirror. What stared back at us wasn't cruelty, but reality. Fear, when used wisely, isn't violence. It's the quiet signal that keeps chaos from swallowing order. It's the low hum beneath authority, the unspoken rhythm that keeps respect alive long after words fade. And yet knowing this is not the same as living it, because if fear can earn respect, what happens when kindness starts costing you power? That's where the real conflict begins, when good people start betraying their own instincts just to keep the peace. In the next part, we'll step inside that conflict to see how endless niceness becomes a trap and why breaking free from it isn't cruelty, but the beginning of self-respect. It starts early. The small rewards for good behavior, the smile from a teacher when you stay quiet, the gentle pat on the head for not arguing, the approval that feels like love. Slowly you learn that being agreeable brings peace, that obedience keeps affection intact. What you don't realize is that this training carves deep grooves in your mind, grooves that become lifelong habits of submission. By the time you grow up, that pattern has matured. You've become the person who apologizes first, even when you're not wrong, the one who avoids confrontation, who fills silence with explanations just to keep everyone comfortable. You tell yourself this is empathy, but it's not empathy, it's conditioning, the kind that teaches you to earn your right to exist by being pleasing. Psychologists call this validation dependency, an emotional addiction to approval. It's the quiet belief that if you keep everyone happy, you'll finally feel safe. But safety built on other people's moods is a fragile shelter. Every smile becomes a vote of existence. Every frown feels like rejection. You start living in emotional debt, constantly paying others with your compliance. Over time, this habit turns into self-abandonment, the slow process of deserting your own needs to maintain peace around you. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in the thousand small choices where you say it's fine when it's not. Each one chips away at your sense of self, until one day, you look in the mirror and see someone polite, kind, and voiceless. You trade respect for approval until both disappear. And when that emptiness settles in, it's not anger you feel. It's fatigue, the kind that sits behind the eyes, invisible to everyone but you. Picture a garden left untouched. The gardener, afraid to cut anything, lets every vine grow wild. For a while it looks beautiful, alive, overflowing, but soon the weeds choke the roses, and the air disappears under the weight of overgrowth. The same happens with endless niceness. Without pruning, without the firm act of saying no, your boundaries vanish beneath other people's needs. What once was kindness becomes overgrowth. What once was life becomes suffocation. And it shows in your behavior. You start explaining yourself to people who already understand, apologizing for things that aren't your fault, fixing problems that were never yours to solve. You rescue others while quietly drowning yourself. You hold on to peace so tightly that it crumbles in your hands. There's a cruel irony in it. The harder you try to be good, the more invisible you feel. Studies in behavioral psychology show a clear pattern. People mirror the value others place on themselves. When you act as if your time, opinions, or emotions are secondary, the world takes its cue. Overgiving doesn't inspire admiration, it signals low self-worth, and the cycle deepens. You give more, hoping to be valued, and end up being respected even less. The turning point comes when you realize that kindness without self-respect isn't kindness at all. It's fear dressed in good manners. You're not nurturing relationships, you're maintaining permission slips for others to use you. Every time you silence your discomfort to keep the peace, you choose temporary relief over long-term dignity. But the solution isn't to swing to the other extreme. You don't have to become cold or detached to protect yourself. Strength doesn't mean losing compassion, it means redefining it. True compassion includes yourself. It knows when to give and when to withdraw. It understands that saying no isn't cruelty, it's integrity. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time you disagreed and still felt calm? When was the last time you walked away without guilt? The discomfort that rises in those moments isn't failure, it's your old conditioning trying to survive. The path forward is learning to stand firm without hardening your heart, to let empathy coexist with self-worth, to let kindness breathe again by giving it structure. In the next part, we'll explore that balance, how fear and fairness can coexist, and how quiet authority can command more respect than 1,000 explanations ever could. Imagine a scale suspended in silence. On one side, the word power, on the other, compassion. The two plates hover, trembling, always at risk of tipping too far. Every leader, every parent, every person who's ever held responsibility knows this tension, the delicate act of commanding respect without breeding resentment. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that balance better than most. He lived in an age where power could vanish overnight. One wrong alliance, one misplaced act of mercy, and your name could be erased. He saw rulers fall not because they were cruel, but because they were careless with their fear. To be respected, he observed, one must inspire caution, not terror, because terror breeds rebellion, but caution builds order. In modern life, the stage has changed, but the performance hasn't. Power no longer wears crowns, it wears titles, roles, and relationships. The manager leading a team, the parent guiding a child, the partner holding emotional ground in a relationship. In every case, authority is tested daily, not by armies but by boundaries. The managers who earn quiet loyalty aren't the ones who shout, they're the ones who stay consistent. Their teams know exactly where the limits are. Their praise carries weight because it's earned, and their criticism is respected because it's fair. The same applies to parents who enforce rules without cruelty. Children may resist those rules in the moment, but they come to trust that structure. In the long run, stability builds love far deeper than indulgence ever could. Psychologists call this latent power, influence that doesn't need to announce itself. It's like gravity, invisible yet inescapable. You don't see gravity working, but you feel its pull in every step. True authority functions the same way. It doesn't demand attention, it quietly shapes behavior through certainty. When someone carries themselves with calm confidence, the entire room adjusts around them. But that kind of presence isn't born from dominance, it comes from self-control. The less you're ruled by emotion, the more others see you as grounded. Anger, defensiveness, or constant over-explaining signal weakness because they show loss of control. The person who stays composed in conflict communicates something stronger than aggression. They communicate certainty. Psychologically, consistency creates predictability, and predictability builds safety. People respect what they can trust. Even fear, when balanced with fairness, builds that trust. It says, you know my limits and I will hold them every time. There's no guessing, no manipulation, no volatility, just steady clarity. Now picture this in your own life. You don't have to change your personality or pretend to be dominant. Small, quiet shifts make all the difference. A simple no instead of an apology. Eye contact that lasts a second longer than comfort allows. Choosing silence instead of defending what's already clear. Leaving a room when it turns toxic. Not to make a point, but to remind everyone that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. These gestures recalibrate the unspoken contract of respect. They say, I can care deeply but I cannot be controlled. They express both sides of the scale, compassion and power, without ever needing to declare them. This is the art Machiavelli hinted at, and psychology later confirmed. Fear and fairness aren't opposites, they're coordinates. Remove fear entirely, and chaos spreads. Remove fairness and rebellion brews. The secret lies in the space between, where strength is wrapped in calm, and authority walks hand in hand with empathy. And once you grasp that, everything shifts. You begin to see that gentleness isn't weakness, it's refinement. It's the patience to wait instead of react, to stand firm without rage. It's the ability to stay kind while being immovable, to make others feel safe but never entitled. Strength, in its highest form, is quiet. It doesn't need to punish, it doesn't need to prove, it simply is. Like gravity, it anchors everyone around it, and the moment it's gone, everyone feels the absence. The balance on that scale is never permanent. It's something you recalibrate daily, through tone, posture, and action. Fear keeps the edges sharp. Fairness keeps the heart intact. Together they form the kind of authority that doesn't just command obedience, it earns respect. And that's where power stops being control and becomes presence. In the next part, we'll move into the final transformation, where this strength turns inward, where fear, fairness, and kindness merge into something greater, personal sovereignty. There comes a quiet moment in everyone's life when you realize the cost of being liked. You sit in a room, maybe surrounded by people, maybe completely alone, and feel the weight of a question pressing against your ribs. Have I been living for peace or for approval? It's a small difference in words, but an ocean in meaning. Peace is inner stillness. Approval is borrowed oxygen. One sustains you, the other drains you. And for years, you may have chosen the second without realizing it, because being accepted felt safer than being misunderstood. But the truth always waits, and one day, it shows up quietly but firmly, like someone knocking on the inside of your chest. That voice says, you don't have to keep earning your right to exist. Respect doesn't begin when others see your value. It begins the moment you stop negotiating it. It's not something taught in school or explained by family or faith. It's a personal rebellion, the decision to stop trading authenticity for belonging. The transformation starts invisibly. The same person who once feared rejection begins choosing silence over forced smiles. The one who used to say yes out of habit now pauses, breathes, and answers truthfully. It's not anger, it's awakening. Boundaries that once felt like walls start to feel like doors protecting the life inside. From the outside, people may call this change selfish. They'll say you've become distant, harder to please, colder. But what they're really reacting to is the loss of access. Access they were never meant to have without respect. Because when you rise from self-abandonment, the world is forced to renegotiate how it treats you. That's the essence of sovereignty. A word we usually reserve for nations, but one that belongs equally to the human spirit. Sovereignty is self-governance. It's the moment you stop being ruled by the moods, desires, and expectations of others. You become your own territory, with borders built not from bitterness but from clarity. And this, ultimately, is where Machiavelli's insight reaches its highest form. He once saw fear as a tool of control in the brutal theater of politics, but when translated into the psychology of modern life, the focus shifts. The goal isn't fear, it's stability, the kind of presence that commands attention, not through threat, but through self-possession. Because the greatest kind of power is calm. It doesn't demand loyalty, it inspires it. It doesn't intimidate, it radiates assurance. True authority, the kind that lasts, comes from someone who knows their worth so completely they don't need to prove it. You see it in those who've done the inner work. The parent who leads with patience, yet can't be manipulated by guilt. The leader who listens without losing their voice. The friend who forgives without erasing their boundaries. Their strength doesn't come from domination, it comes from alignment. They have nothing to prove, and everything to protect. In this space, kindness becomes pure again. No longer a strategy for acceptance, but a reflection of wholeness. Because kindness without boundaries dissolves. Kindness with boundaries becomes wisdom, and that's not duality, that's maturity. It's understanding that compassion and strength aren't opposites, they're the same current flowing in two directions. One reaches outward, the other anchors inward. Together, they form the full spectrum of human dignity. Picture a lighthouse during a storm. It doesn't chase ships or beg them to see its light. It stands firm, guiding those who seek it, warning those who come too close. It's trusted by sailors and feared by rocks. The sea can roar, the waves can strike, but the structure remains. That's what self-respect looks like. A light that serves without submission. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to be seen. Silence, backed by self-respect, echoes louder than any argument ever could. And that silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. It's the sound of someone who's come home to themselves. So take a moment and ask yourself, where in your life have you given away your authority? Where have you mistaken tolerance for love or endurance for strength? Where do you still fear being disliked more than being disrespected? Because that's where your boundary waits to be rebuilt. That's where your sovereignty begins. You were never meant to live at the mercy of other people's approval. You were meant to stand as your own lighthouse, steady, guiding, gentle, but unshakable. To be kind, not because you need to be liked, but because peace is your nature. That is the evolution of strength, the kind that neither shouts nor submits. It simply shines. Fade out. The storm still rages, but the light remains.